Welcome back to the Schwab Network. Welcome back to Fast Market. Now, I'd like to bring in our cash tag segment, and for that, I would like to bring in Mr. Andy Swan. He's the co-founder of LikeFolio.com, and we're talking Tesla. Andy, you know what I love the most? Is when LikeFolio reaches out with data that you guys have, because I know it's something good when you do that. So you came to us with the idea of Tesla today, so I'm excited to hear what you guys are talking about. What do you have for our viewers in Tesla?
Yeah, Tesla reports earnings next week, and we're not sure how that will go. We think that'll go okay. There's some delivery problems in China, some production problems that I think are already baked into the cake. But from a long-term perspective, we just have to say that Tesla looks to be firing on all cylinders, and there's really one big reason for that, and that is they've gotten the price of the vehicles down to kind of no-brainer levels from a competitive standpoint. They've got the base Model 3 sedan now is at $39,000 or under $39,000, which is $9,000 less than the average car purchase price in the United States, and right there with a Toyota Corolla in terms of, from a competitive standpoint. All of a sudden, what, 4 or 5 years ago was a luxury kind of neat to have gimmicky type of thing to own a Tesla, and it was very expensive, is now right there on par with buying a Toyota Corolla. And who would have thought that we could get there? You can see the drastic price cuts that Tesla has been able to put out there really matches up really nicely with the cost of ownership. Interest rates have gone up considerably, so leasing or purchasing a car on a loan has gotten significantly more expensive. And so what Tesla has done is combated that through price cuts, and I think they're going to be able to maintain their margins while they do that. And the response from the consumer that we've seen to these price cuts has been extraordinary. Web visits to Tesla.com are up 59% year over year to all-time highs. This is a massive, massive move from a company that gets most of its purchases through online channels, especially Tesla.com. So seeing those web visits at all-time highs in reaction to these price cuts tells us Tesla is creating basically a one-horse race and expanding the lead in the EV market, and now is just becoming a matter of time, we think, before it's just the dominant automotive company, period.
I love the point, Andy, and you can feel the pressure being exerted from Tesla right now, making these decisions to move prices lower from strength, not necessarily from weakness, although you'll read that they're trying to spur demand, but your data certainly suggesting different. I've read a lot about them maybe deploying, and they've been disruptors in many ways in this space, and the model of which you do business with them, very different than traditional autos. But this idea of the razor blade model, do you see anything in that where they're not necessarily even seeing the car possibly as the driver of actual bottom line earnings, but rather all the things that you can add to it, all the technologies they're working on, and this becoming more of almost a software or service-like company in the long term?
Yeah, you can really feel that. I feel that as a Tesla owner. When you get into the car, every couple of weeks, it's downloaded an update that makes your car even better at driving 79 miles an hour through traffic and going, off the exits at the right time and making the turns all on its own. And I just think to myself, if a company can pull off that with me, and my family sitting in the car and do that safely, then what can't they achieve from a software and artificial intelligence perspective? So I really think of Tesla as one of the biggest, greatest artificial intelligence plays there is. The computing power that they're amassing, the data that they're amassing, pretty much unrivaled among certainly any automotive companies. It could be unrivaled across the world, except for maybe Microsoft and Google. So I think your point is well taken. There's rumors that Elon Musk may roll out a smartphone at some point. He's got the satellites in the sky. He owns the world's largest real-time, conversation network in Twitter or X. And so you kind of can see where this could go a lot of different directions. And you could see a scenario where actually the car becomes, that first hit that gets people into the ecosystem, much like Apple did with the iPhone, and then Tesla X, whatever you want to call it, all becomes one big software as a service play. I could totally see how that could happen, and I wouldn't bet against it in any way.
Andy, the drum I beat whenever we talk about Tesla is the pipeline, right? And Cathie Wood came out with a statement that is quite incredible. She said by 2027, their move into autonomous driving, right? They'll make more money from autonomous driving by 2027, not that far away, than they do from EVs, with margins of over 50%, Andy. Like I said, what would frighten me if I was ever a Tesla bear would be the pipeline and what's next and what's coming.
Yeah.
Like the robo-taxi, right, which is supposed to dominate their earnings in the future, Andy.
Yeah, I think Cathie Wood is I think she has excellent visionary qualities. I think her date may be a little aggressive. I'll tell you, as someone who uses the autonomous driving of Tesla all the time, I'm constantly having to turn it off in certain situations, certain weather conditions. It's making leaps and bounds of progress, but the idea that people will be getting into these without anybody in the driver's seat just a few years from now, I think is very aggressive and very optimistic. But I do think it will happen, and I think that the trajectory of the prediction is correct. And so you think about that, you think about the AI infrastructure that they're building, the computing power that they're building, the mapping technology. There's a lot of ways for this company to make money that don't rely on selling a car for more than it costs to produce. And they're even winning at that. And so I think from a long-term perspective, this is kind of one of those companies where I think the Tesla Q folks have folded and are out of the game at this point. I would at least hope that this is either, I'm in it because I'm bullish, or I'm waiting to get in it because the price could drop in the near term. But I think those are the two only acceptable outlooks, at least from a LikeFolio perspective.
Andy, that kind of goes along the lines of sort of my final comment/question for you. So one of the phrases I heard when I first got in this business is never fade a superstar. That doesn't stop at just trading or investing, goes to sports and everything. Yep. When you're looking at this, I think it's hard to not think of Elon Musk with that entrepreneurial mindset, that willing to disrupt, is anything other than a superstar at this point when it came to what they've created at Tesla. But as an entrepreneur yourself and someone who's constantly looking at ways to disrupt it and think outside the box, is there any other company that's achieved this level of scale and size that still thinks that way on a daily basis? You said Apple, but Apple's still such a machine and they're doing things so methodically, it doesn't feel like they're changing the world anymore. They just impact the world. Tesla seemingly is still changing and disrupting on a daily basis.
Yeah, I don't think we've really seen, and I think Apple, when Steve Jobs was still at the helm, felt that way. I think there is a connection between having the founder, or at least, in Elon's case, the very early, kind of lifetime CEO of the company, still involved and still with that visionary spirit rather than the financial, implications type of methodical approach that you're talking about. So I don't think that we've ever seen a company that got to these levels that still had that, inquisitive, optimistic, change the world type of founder mentality since we had Steve Jobs at Apple. I think that's the best analogy I can come up with. And I agree with you. You don't bet against Tesla. Look, Tesla's a very volatile stock. So the idea that it could fall 40% over the next 6 months is very, very real. So people need to understand they're still taking a considerable risk buying Tesla at any price level if their outlook is near term or if their exit is near term. But I think long term, if we look at Tesla and think, hey, anytime I see 40%, 30% off of highs, I might dip my toes in and buy a few more shares. I think it's probably a good overall outlook.
Yeah, it's interesting. Changing the world has growing pains, right? And and Tesla is so far ahead of everyone else. And I got one 2-word example: charging stations, right? They are the clear leader where now the legacy automakers are using Tesla to charge their electric vehicles. It's nothing short of spectacular. Andy Swan, thanks for coming on. I knew you'd deliver the goods, Andy, today. Thanks for coming on as always. Have a great day.
You too. Appreciate it.
Yep. Alex, now getting to a trade in Tesla.